Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Bridge Inspection Updates webinar. My name is Mike Fitch with the Ohio LTAP Center here at ODOT, and we appreciate your participation. As we get started, please take a moment to locate the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. During the presentations today, please use the questions box to send in any questions you might have, and I'll be dispatching those periodically to the instructors. Please note also that the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel includes a PDF copy of the PowerPoint presentations for reference. With that, we will go ahead and turn things over to Tim Keller, who is the administrator for ODOT's Office of Structural Engineering. Tim, hello.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. Doing this virtually has its pros and cons. You get to see my ugly face in my golf cave here. But the advantage of it is that we have a lot of people able to listen in today. So appreciate all your time. Downside is, we don't have those face-to-face communications that hopefully next year we'll get back together. So a couple of things. I want to go over some rules of engagement and a couple of announcements. One is questions. We'll take questions immediately after every presentation. When there's time. If the time doesn't allow, we'll take them at the end of the webinar. And if worse comes to worse, we will email you the answers. So you will get answers to any of your questions. So please put those in the chat box. The handouts are there. They will also be emailed to you with your PDHs. It'll take about a week to get your PDHs. So those of you looking for that, give it a little time. There's a lot of people on this call. And yes, we are going to take some short breaks. If the presentations get a little long, those breaks may shorten up. So there's encouragement for the presentations to stay on time. A couple of things. Why are we here? What's the goal of today? There's kind of two goals that we're trying to achieve today. The first and biggest is compliance. Are we in compliance with the FHWA's 23 metrics? And you'll hear from that, and we generally are, but there's some things we can improve on. So hence today is an area to improve. The second area that we're going to hit a little bit on today is consistency. Right, a consistency statewide. A 6 at ODOT inspector should be a 6 at county inspector, should be a 6 for the city's inspector. A 6 in Cleveland should be the same as a 6 in Cincinnati, should be the same in Toledo. So consistency, it's a goal. Will we ever achieve consistency universally? Probably not, but it's a goal that we should still try to achieve. So that's part of what today's about as well. A couple of things that I'd like to share. First of all, we're going to use the word asset-wise. Let's start there. The acronym on that is terrible. We're now fully engaged with asset-wise, so let's use asset-wise across the board. I've heard various acronyms try to be used, so let's go with that. One announcement I'm going to make, Mark Stockman is retiring again. For those of you that have dealt with Mark has done an amazing job to get the county system compliant, and I'll be forever thankful for Mark for his work. You'll hear from him today, one of his parting shots today. And Mark Sherman will be taking over for Mark Stockman, so we're keeping the marks. Mark Sherman is previously was the Franklin County bridge engineer. That was one of his duties, deputy there at Franklin County. So he has history there. He's coming off the private sector, a little stint there. So Mark will be taking over. Mark's got a learning curve to get to, and I fully expect him to do a great job for us. So that's the other announcement I wanted to make. And the last announcement, for those of you not aware, ODOT has proposed a reliability-based inspection cycle that's currently in the Senate. The vote on it hasn't happened yet, so we're hopeful. For those of you that have seen it go through the process, there's been some questions and answers and so forth. So we're right now the vote should be in the next couple of weeks. Theoretically, it could go in place by July 1. And what I want to make sure everybody understands, what it is not. It is not a 2-year inspection cycle. It is not that. Now, it's a maximum 2-year inspection cycle. So we did the analysis. Roughly half of, a little more than half of ODOT's bridges will go to a 2-year cycle. Roughly half of the county and city program will go to a 2-year cycle. But we will have much more discussions on that if this passes. If it doesn't pass, we will continue where we are. But we have proposed an update in the state law. So unfortunately, we don't have control over it. That's the legislators' duties. So please do not call it a 2-year inspection cycle. I don't want that to be what everybody thinks that is, because that's not what it is. Okay, that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Kenny Tong. Kenny is our FHWA Division Bridge Engineer. So Kenny, it is all yours.
Thank you, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you, Kenny.
Okay. So yeah, as Tim mentioned, the goal is to get compliance on all 23 metrics. So today I'm gonna give you a quick overview on some of the findings from last year and give you a little update on, as you all heard, about the new MBIS rule and coding guide. So this is a quick outline. I'm gonna give you a little background on the compliance assessment called the 23 metrics, share some of the observation and findings from last year, and give you the MBIS update and other important updates as well. So the 23 metrics is kind of a black box for those outside of the agencies. And so what it is Federal Highway took the MBIS regulations, broke it down into 23 measurable, what they call metrics, and do an assessment on each one. And you have four types of compliance status. So compliance means everything is all good, and substantial compliance means there's deficiencies that need to be addressed that requires a short-term improvement plan and what we call IP. And then conditional compliance is more substantial deficiencies and requires a more long-term plan called a plan of corrective actions. And then non-compliance means deficiencies not resolved. So that's something we don't ever want to be at. As we started this new 23 metric process review in 2011, and for the whole state of Ohio, we have 11 compliance, 11 conditional compliance, and 1 substantial. And as of last year, we improved all the way to 19 compliance, 1 conditional compliance, and 3 substantial compliance. So we're made huge progress in the last 9 years. So just kind of give you a quick overview of what a metric review entitles. So usually the division would generate a random sample. And since Ohio has 27 plus 7,000 bridges, we can't look at all of them. So what we do is we sample about 19 to 20 bridges. We look through the MBI data and look at all the bridge files components, such as photos, inspection reports, if the bridge is scour critical, if it has a plan of action in it, if there's a critical finding. And if we find any inconsistencies or issues, we communicate those issues to the ODOT POCs. So for the districts and turnpike, the point of contact is Mike Brokaw. For the counties is Mark Stockman. And then for the munis and park district would be Omar. So I will go over the findings from these 4 metrics. So we got team leader qualification is metric 3, metric 12 is quality inspections, 18 is scour, and then 21 is critical findings. So for metric 3, we review the qualifications of the team leaders. So what we did is we random sample 19 inspections and identified the 19 unique team leaders. And with a new asset-wise that you can check the qualifications, there's a nice feature in there that you can look through all the certificates and verify the year's experience, whether the team leader is a PE or not. And so what we verify is we make sure the individual has a comprehensive training and then a refresher training completed within the last 5 years. So we typically accept a proof of certificate or a sign-in sheet. And for specific cases where the individual may not kept the certificate, we verify with the year's bridge experience as well. So out of the 19 team leaders, 15 of them met the requirements, means they have the certificates, they have the year's experience, or their PEs. And 4 team leaders we found that did not have the level 1 or level 2 training. Upon further review, all of these individuals either met the grandfather clause, means they have taken the training before 2006. 2006 is when the last regulation is updated. And they were PE, they've done the old training, and then they also completed refresher training in the last 5 years. And then for cases where the individual who is not a PE and is already a team leader or program manager before 2006, ODOT would approve those individuals on a case-by-case basis and verify the bridge experience. So out of all 19 individuals, all of them met the requirements. So metric 3 is compliant. Next, we move on to the quality inspections. So typically we would go random sample 19 bridges, we'll go on the field, meet with the owners, inspectors, and talk through the findings in the inspection report. Unfortunately, due to the unique circumstance last year with the pandemic, we were able to do a virtual field review, which means that we look through the inspection reports, look through all the photos, and do the best we can to verify the photos with condition rating that's given and the inspection comments. So we verify if notable deficiencies are documented, which means anytime a condition rating is rated less than 6, we look for comments in this inspection report to justify that rating. And then also we verify if the narrative justifies the rating. So it's detailed enough to explain what controls the rating that's given. As you all know, that as we transition to the new asset-wise, we're no longer using the inspection report form, the field inspection report form, where you can add ratings to these subcomponents. And without this form, inspection comments are even more crucial. So what we found is that some of the inspections that there were no comments for component rating less than 6, and some of the narrative is very generic. For example, when the deck is rating of 5, we would see comments such as stains on the floor, which doesn't really say a whole lot. And then some of the inspection photos that we looked at does not really hone in on a defect. It's just more of a general elevation photo, and we would like to see photos zoom in on the defects, and then with comments to back it up. So for this metric, we found a handful of bridges that does not meet the intent of the metric requirements. So this metric is substantially compliant. So it requires a improvement plan that one is to ODOT would develop written standards for consistent reporting and inspection comments, and present a webinar to the inspection staff, which is what we're doing today. That is something that Mike Brokaw will go over in the later presentation. And then provide comments for all the condition ratings less than 6 in this inspection cycle. And for action number 3, that would be, we'll have till the end of the year to complete this. Okay, moving on to metric 18 for Scour. We random sample 19 bridges again. And if a bridge is Scour critical, we would check the bridge file to make sure there's a plan of action. And also, as you all know, that we're started collecting channel photos, and the inspector has the option to either do channel photos or channel profile. And most people opt in for channel photos because it's quicker, it's easier, and we want to make sure the channel photos are done correctly. And then we want to verify that item 113, the Scour rating, is consistent with the coding guide. So in the findings, we found that one bridge that is Scour critical did not have a plan of action. And upon further review, the bridge is no longer Scour critical. So we kind of gave it a pass on that one. And then we found 4 bridges that does not have correct channel photos, which means that the channel photos are taken from on top of the bridge instead of going from the channel and looking at the bridge. So over time, you can see how the channel degrades and spot any Scour issues. And since the 4 bridges that did not have proper channel photos, we rated the bridge, the metric substantially compliant. And which means that we'll need an improvement plan as well. And so the action items are presented webinar to inspection staff, and Mark Stockman will go over the proper ways to take channel photos. And then action number 2 is Mark Stockman is retiring, so Mark Sherman will spot check some of the inspection reports in all the counties and make sure all the channel photos are taken in the proper direction. And lastly is metric 21 for critical findings. And again, we random sample 15 bridges that has critical findings. We want to make sure that FHWA is notified periodically. And then when a bridge is considered as critical finding, means condition rating less than 3. And they would have critical finding forms or inspection comments documented discussing the critical findings, how they're going to be addressed. And more importantly, we want to make sure immediate actions are taken on the timely manner to address those critical findings. And of all 15 bridges, we found one bridge that took about 4 to 5 weeks to implement the safety actions to put the barrier to divert the traffic from, I think it's I think the deck, I think the guardrail and the deck has a lot of cracks and it's unstable, and the owner took too long to implement the safety actions. And so we also found that the critical findings were not always documented immediately. So means that critical finding would be found today, and then the critical finding form would not be filled out until weeks or months later. And then we want to make sure that notification to Federal Highway could use some improvements. Is discussed in the draft MBIS rule is that in the future, potentially, notification to FHWA could be as soon as 24 hours. So we want to be prepared for that. And also for metric 21, the compliance status is substantially compliant. So we're going to need an improvement plan for this as well. So the action number 1 is create a new critical finding form. This is a form that you can find in AssetWise today. And whenever you rate a condition component rating less than 3, you would go into this link here and fill out the critical finding form. And then also, whenever inspection report contains a condition rating less than 3, ODOT and me and the owners will receive automatic email and make sure that the critical finding is addressed and followed up. And then lastly is present a webinar on to the inspection staff. I think that's something either Mike or Mark will talk about it at the later presentation as well. So lastly, for the MBIS update, as you all hear that there's a new MBIS regulations coming out and then with the new coding guide. So back in 2019, the proposed rule came out. And there's a commenting period that I hope all of you put in comments and what could be addressed and could be improved in the proposed rule. And the commenting period ended in January 2020. And FHWA has finished reviewing all the comments. And then with the change administration, and the final rule is still being delayed. Hopefully that it will come out by the end of the year, but as of now, I don't have any further update, unfortunately. So the draft is still in the approval process, and then, like I mentioned, it's delayed due to change administration. And then other important updates is Federal Highways started compiling a critical finding database nationwide. So as you fill out those critical finding form in AssetWise, I will be reporting those up to headquarters as well. So so that way Federal Highway can track some of the deficiencies happening across nationwide and then see what we can do to keep the public safe. And then as of right now, we're only reviewing the MBI data quality, and we have not started reviewing the element data quality yet. But in the future, that we're going to start looking into the element data as well. So we're making sure that the condition state has the proper quantities and the elements are being selected, and then making sure the comments in the inspection report justify for those defect quantities in the condition states. And then last thing is I want to remind everyone that whenever a bridge is recommended for posting, and the owner has 30 days to post a bridge. And just to give you guys a heads up is that this year we're going to be doing an intermediate assessment on metric 14 on posting. So that is something we're going to be verifying to make sure that all the bridges are being posted within the 30-day time frame. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, you can put in the chat box or speak up, and I'll try to address them as best as I can.
Hey, Kenny, this is Mike Brokaw.
Yeah.
While we're loading Stockman up here, I have a couple questions. Some well-wishing for Mark. The question, does today's session qualify as refresher training? The answer is no. Today's is just a webinar. For those of you that want to take refresher training, there's an online COVID special only. If you search for ODOT LTAP e-learning, you can take the bridge inspection refresher training. It's a 7-module course, self-paced, to get us through COVID. So that is available now. Last question, well, a couple more questions. Out of the structures included in your audit, Kenny, how many structures were maintained by ODOT, county, municipality, and so forth? What's the split?
So in the random sample process that we include all of them, so we don't divide the ownership by state. So we take the 27,000 and do the random generator, and so you know, we have more bridges in the state, so obviously state bridges get picked quite a bit, as well as counties. So that's the way we approach it. We don't try to divide them and split them up equally. It's all random.
Out of the 19 in 2020, do you remember the split? I think everybody had some. I know it was county, city, state, everyone had some in the sample.
Yeah, I don't remember on the top of my head. So typically we would have 2 to 3 bridges in the munis, 6 to 7 bridges with the states, and then most of them are with the counties.
Okay.
Does that sound right, Mike? County says about half the bridges. I can't remember the split.
The ratio, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Next question. There are some questions about critical findings. We'll hold those for the critical finding discussion that Jared and Omar are going to cover. I think a lot of your questions will be answered by them. When will the NHI training begin again? It's a question.
Yeah, that's. I think they're looking into developing a virtual class, but unfortunately, the only virtual class they have given is for the tunnel refresher. So I don't have much update on the NHI comprehensive, and hopefully with the vaccines and stuff coming out, that they're going to start allowing in-person training. But as of now, I don't have any update.
Yeah, a lot of critical finding questions. We'll hold that for Omar and Jared. So that's a teaser. Posting, Bill Evans, posting is not required when the GA equals less than 4. Posting, it should be re-rated to determine if it needs posted. And I think that's enough for now. I think we could turn it over to Stockman. Thanks, Kenny.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We're going to talk about channel scour, baseline photos, and all that. So about 5 years ago, we were told that our scour evaluations were not compliant. So the problem was item 113, scour critical. You fill in the code, you look at the manual and pick a code. We put in code 8, code 5, those kind of things. But we never wrote down why we chose that. We never had no documentation. So most people chose code 8 or code 5. A few people had a code 4, which mitigation for erosion. And we don't want any code 6. But item 113 is what was driving this. So to respond to that shortcoming, ODOT developed a procedure for channel cross sections and baseline photos. It's in the Ohio Structure Office webpage under the bridge inspection section, and it's in the miscellaneous resources. You can read that procedure. Basically what it says is when you have a dive inspection or scour critical bridges where item 113 is a 3, 2, or 1, you must take must do channel cross sections. All bridges that don't have to do a channel cross section must have baseline photographs on the file. They do not have to be uploaded to AssetWise, but it's better if you do. Otherwise, we have to contact you and we have to dig them up and mail them to us or email them to us. It just saves a lot of time. If you do put them up, which are not required. And if you can't get photos for some reason, you need to do a channel cross section. So channel cross section, there's a tutorial in the AssetWise under the help section under documentation. And then in the each individual bridge, there's a section for channel bed measurements. Gives you a nice table to input the data and the columns and so forth. And it will actually plot out a diagram of your channel based on your measurements. Because you need to see what those measurements show. It's not good enough just to have measurements. We want to get an idea visually what the channel is like. Okay, if you're going to do photographs instead of the baseline photos, then you are going to also agree to a global statement. Most people forget about that. And if you can't agree to the global statement, you have to go back to the cross sections. So here's what the global statement does. And the county engineer is elected, and it talks about his qualifications and so forth. But the key words are right here. The county engineers are familiar with the local watershed factors that affect long-term bed elevation changes, runoff behavior. Therefore, the county engineer hereby affirms the SMS, which is now asset-wise, Scour Code Item 113. If your county engineer does not know the hydraulics of your county, then he can't confirm Item 113, and you have to go back to channel cross sections. But all the county engineers live in their county, and they know how the streams behave in their county. So Item 113 is hopefully verified by the engineer and his staff, and that gives everyone a sense of confidence that it's done correctly. The photos, you need a minimum 2 photos, but add more if needed. You need to be upstream and downstream looking at the bridge. And as I mentioned before, we recommend but not require upload to AssetWise. So the first deadline was in 18. We have to repeat them every 60 months. So in 2023, 1920, we'll be looking at repeat. And that's not only for the photos, but also all the channel cross sections. And if you can't get the photos, do the cross sections and have them in your file. What do we want to show? We want to show the stream aggradation and degradation. That means if the stream is adding deposits, sandbar, silt deposits, tailings, or degradation, removing the channel bed, scour hole, lowering the flow line, erosion, we want to show that in the photos so when we look back at it and compare over time, we can see if anything is changing. So let's look at some pictures. Okay. Okay. This is going to be a good picture. The inlet side of this bridge on County 22, it shows both sides, shows the channel toes, everything's great. We can see everything we need to see. I did have another side. Yeah, that's the other, same bridge, the other side, same thing. We can see it good. Now, Township 383. I left the counties out to keep it anonymous, but here, this channel shows the angled approach to the bridge, and the photograph shows that. Another photo to show how that angle plays with the bridge would be helpful. And watch the focus. This was a thumbnail size picture. When you blow it up, it gets a little fuzzy. So watch that. Same bridge. I can't see the left-hand side, how the channel interacts with the abutment. So we need an extra photo to cover that. Watch the focus on the thumbnail size. It's blurry again. So here's the same bridge. Here's some additional photos. This helps a lot. We can see it's on bedrock. We can see the piling goes down. It's a good additional photo. Another good additional photo. The channel is just starting to possibly get behind the abutment here. It's good for comparison in the future. Another good additional photo shows the solid foundation for the abutment. Same thing here. So those are good examples. This bridge, County 78, doesn't really show what I want to see. I want to see the abutment and how the water is close to the abutment. So I think the channel is close to that abutment, but I can't tell. This one is really hard to tell. That might be the flow line right there, the toe of the channel, but we really need better photos here. Here's a bridge. It shows the bridge from the channel, you think, okay, that's what they're asking for, but it doesn't show us what we need to see. Can you see the water at the abutments? Can you see if it's endangering the abutments, or if there's going to be anything you need to watch? Closer shots would be better. So here's the other angle, the other side of the bridge. And I tried to zoom in on the left-hand side right here, I showed, and it's really hard to see. That might be the toe of the channel there, I think it is. But there's not enough detail on this bridge to compare it in the future to see if there's changes. So we need to have some additional shots on this bridge to tell the story. Here's a bridge. We're looking away from the bridge. This will not count as a channel baseline photo. Same bridge. Here we go. Now we can see what the channel is doing at this abutment, but we still need an overall picture from back looking at the bridge so we can see how the channel flows under the bridge. I can see the other abutment now, and that's good. I'd like to see a little picture about, is water getting behind the wall or not? So, and again, we still need a distance, a perspective photo showing how the channel flows under the bridge, up and downstream. Here's a bridge, County Road 18, just simply a bad angle. It's just no other way to put it. We can't see what the channel is doing. So they took the other side of the bridge, and now I can't see the left-hand side. So we need additional photos here. Nothing wrong with taking more than 2 photos. Now, same bridge, more photos, trying to get it right. It's dark underneath. I can't see anything what the channel is doing. So what's happening? Same bridge, a little bit lighter. I think the channel is going on amongst that abutment. The comments refer to old concrete and a sandbar. Well, here's the concrete. That's good. We have that in the photo. Here's the sandbar. That's good to have in the photo, but these are good additional photos now. So now we're starting to get a little clearer picture, something we can refer to in the future. This is a nice photo underneath. The sun makes it hard to see, but now you can see the channel is along that abutment, and the toe on this side is not against the abutment. So you need to become an amateur photographer as well as a bridge inspector. You need to watch your exposure, the picture size, the sunlight, compose your pictures properly. So here's a good picture. County Road 3 shows the channel, sandbar, flow line, obstructions in the back with the cattle fence. Everything is very, very clear and good. It would be nice to see the left abutment in a different picture to make sure there's no additional scour hole or anything affecting that abutment. But if this is the actual channel, this is great. So this is in 2019. In 2020, they took the same picture, and it's changed a little bit, which is good for reference. But grab a photo anytime if it shows helpful features. For example, compare the two. 2019, that is an excellent photo. 2020, that's pretty good, but it's not quite as clear as 2019. So it just gives you an example. If you have a time of year or a different inspection that shows better photos, grab it and use it for your channel photos. This bridge on the right, same one. Here's the cattle fence. And look, now we have a gap in the below the foundation encasement. And here's the close-up of that gap. But the comments refer to the rear and forward abutments, right and left side. It'd be really helpful if you could label these pictures. We don't know which comments apply to which part of this picture. Here's a typical photo I see a lot on culverts where they're standing inside the culvert, taking a picture through. It does not show what we need to see, how the channel is approaching the bridge. So one from the outside looking down, that doesn't help at all. Here's the bridge, and I can maybe see the channel toe on that side. It's really hard, dark. Can't see anything on this side, so that's not going to help. This angle is better. I can now see the flow line channel, the toe of the channel right here, the sand beach. I can see the toe of the channel over here, but I can't tell if the channel banks are flat, if they are scoured, if they have a hole. I can't tell the shape of the channel banks or the shape of the waterway opening. So this is not a good angle to take your channel photo from. You want to be in the channel, not on top, or on at least on the bank far away from the bridge. Here's a picture. You think at first, hey, this is exactly what they want, showing the bridge, showing the channel. But really, I cannot see the channel bottom on the left or the right. So it doesn't show me what I want. Look on the right. This is just a little bit closer, and it helps a lot. Now I can see the channel on the left side. I can see the channel on the right side, a little sandbar blocking the way. This is great. Just being a little bit closer, it helps. Same bridge. Notice the gabions for flow line control. This is a good feature to capture in your photos because this affects the flow line of the channel under the bridge. So it's good to have pictures of this. Here's the bridge. Can't see the abutments. We need different photos. Here's a better picture of the same bridge. Now I can see the flow line on the left-hand side. Right there is a flow line on the right. Being helpful to zoom in a little bit on that photo. Okay, recap. We need to see the channel alignment approaching the bridge and at the toe of the channel at the abutments. One upstream, one downstream, looking at the bridge. If you have poor visibility, brush, whatever, consider using a drone or coming back in the wintertime to take the picture or take a group of pictures. And if all else fails, take channel cross sections. We need enough detail to compare in the future years. We want to look for flow line changes, direction changes, scour, sandbars. And we want to see labels, so which direction you're looking, which abutment you're looking at, which side, upstream or downstream, any particular features. So with that, we're ready for questions, and Mike Burkow can help answer them as well.
Thanks, Mark. Good pictures. I got some questions for you. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. When taking updated Scour photos, should we strive to take photos from the same angle as previous? Or if better ones can be taken, should we take the better ones? Or both?
You can answer those, Mike.
How about you start us off, Mark?
Okay. All right. Repeat the question then. I'm going to get it right here.
Should we always repeat the photo, even if there's a better angle?
Right. If you don't repeat them, you have nothing to compare to in 60 months, 5 years. Yes, repeat the photos would be ideal.
Okay. I like both. I like both. I mean, digital camera, those pictures are pretty inexpensive, and you're already there. You've done the work and gotten there. Snap a couple extras, especially if you can get a better angle for the next inspector. You're also thinking about the 5 years from now or 2 years from now, that person trying to repeat the photo, and they'll have a better option if you have a better angle. Yeah, it's a great question. Got some comments regarding the using unmanned aerial is a good technology for channel banks. And the question was, do we need channel photos on non-MBI bridges?
It's not required by the feds, to my knowledge, but it's a good idea.
Mhm.
But we aren't going to grade you and affect the metric compliance.
Mhm. Yeah. Is there a limit in asset-wise for storage of pictures? Well, we haven't found it yet. We haven't found it yet. The short answer is no, but what I would recommend is limiting the megapixels of the photo. Try to bring it down to 1 or less than 1 meg. And I have noticed with some of our more complex structures with lots and lots of photos and lots of files, they do load slower when you bring up the asset detail page. So it's something to keep in mind there. The question, global statements, do they or do they not affect municipalities? Do municipalities have to have cross sections?
There's a global statement for the municipalities that's geared toward them as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mark. Your focus was the county global statement. There's a global statement for state bridges, and there's a global statement for municipalities, and that's in that, I think it was a 2016 channel profile or channel cross section document. Yeah. You can use videos in lieu of photos. I think that would be something that would have to be stored in your own server and make that decision on your own. But the photos from a good angle is the requirement. And some people are asking for a training on how to take photos. Backlight, sunlight. I don't disagree with that. Good comment. Labeling conventions, standards, etc., like that. It's a good comment. Well, thanks, Mark. We are up against a break, so let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and continue the discussion, continue the bridge inspection virtual workshop. So come back at 9:30, and we will continue. Well, welcome back from break. I still haven't gotten a haircut, for some of you wondering. I would like to continue the conversation regarding, this is more or less from the Federal Highway vantage point, but these lessons do apply to all bridges, even the non-MBI ones, the ones that are 10 to 20 foot, the ones that don't carry highway traffic. Keep in mind when we talk about critical findings and scour and channel changing, it's all in the name of public safety. So keep that in mind. We are not necessarily going to be measuring you against federal compliance with critical findings, scour channel profile stuff. But keep in mind the intent is making sure the public is safe. So we do encourage you to do for the non-MBI bridges as well. Kenny shared with you the findings from metric 12, the quality inspections review. And just think about this, out of 27,000 bridges, 20 were sampled to determine thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, or thumbs down regarding quality inspections. And we got kind of thumbs in the middle, like kind of substantial compliant, but we need an improvement plan. So we need to show improvement. And what I'd like you to do is consider your own work, your own bridges, and how can you improve the quality of inspections on your bridges? And how do you show that you performed a quality inspection? Well, the proof is in the inspection report. So a lot of the time I'm going to spend, or for the next few moments, I'm going to spend talking about the evidence or the proof within the inspection report. And perhaps as I go through the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, begin to consider, how does this apply to me? Am I performing quality inspections? If one of my reports were sampled, do I have room for improvement? Am I performing a quality inspection? Also, those of you that are doing reviews, you have a PE license and you go through and do reviews on these inspection reports, take note of what I'm sharing with you today. And as you start going through your next inspection report review, you'll be able to look for whether or not a report is quality or not quality. And for time's sake, I'm not going to go into element inspection, spreading out the condition states or putting element level notes in. The focus of my talk today is the component ratings. But note that the elements are important. There was a bridge inspection notes in asset-wise document shared through email in February, and it's also loaded into the help documentation screen in asset-wise, and it's also linked to the inspection comments in asset-wise. It's also a handout in this presentation. So if you want to read more into this, please pull this handout out and read through it. And if you haven't read through it, please do so. So Kenny mentioned metric 12. This is one of the 23 metrics, one of the ways in which we're measured. And I'm going to unpack what a quality inspection is from a national perspective. And there's two primary criteria, the A and the B that's listed there in the criteria section. A is each bridge is inspected in accordance with the AASHTO manual for bridge evaluation. Some of you might be thinking, what on earth is that? I thought we had an Ohio manual of bridge inspection. Well, this is one of the many references we look at and we pull from and we interpret and put into the Ohio manual of bridge inspection. What I'm going to do in this talk is just show you exactly what this says. So I'm going to go right to the source. So what is that? What's it say about inspections? A1 is the condition codes are within generally acceptable tolerances. I'll explain what that means. I'll also explain what all notable bridge deficiencies are identified. Want to make sure those are identified. And lastly, the A3 condition codes are supported by narrative that appropriately justifies and documents component condition ratings. So that's quite a mouthful, but that's what each of your reports are measured against. And then the B bullet there is a qualified team leader is at the bridge at all times during each initial, routine, in-depth, fracture critical, and underwater inspection. So that is what every inspection is measured. That's the scope, so to speak. So let's look at what a quality inspection is by starting with the reference. The MBE, the AASHTO is American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, of which Ohio is one active state. We're a member of AASHTO, and we vote, and we're active, and we play an active role in helping vote and develop a lot of these publications. Within the MBE, there's two sections that apply to bridge inspection: the bridge files and documentation, and section 4 inspection. Both of them apply. What I would like to do, mainly because most of you perhaps haven't read through this, is just share with you some of the bullets within the routine inspections. There's 14 bullets. So when each bridge is inspected in accordance with the MBE, we've got different route inspections: the routine, fracture critical, underwater, etc. This is just the routine. There's 14 things that the MBE says you have to do to have a quality inspection. Number 1, determine the condition, physical and functional condition of the bridge. Number 2, identify changes from the initial inspection and identify changes from the last inspection. So tracking change. 4 is ensure the bridge continues to satisfy what its intended purpose is, its safety requirements. Number 5 is inspect from the ground, from the deck, from the water. We expect weighting and probing of substructure units and walking through every culvert, probing for undermining, probing for scour. And here's the kicker: when necessary, and you have to decide based off of what you see, get closer. Use a ladder, a boat, a bucket truck, drone even, a snooper, where its use provides the only practical means of access. Number 9 is get close enough to determine all condition ratings and element quantities and condition states, evaluate all height and weight restriction signs, and then note suspected or confirmed weight or height posting values. For scour critical bridges, follow the POA. And 14, for critical findings, follow the critical finding procedure. Jared and Omar are going to talk about critical findings in a little bit, so I'll save that for them. A1, so I'm going down and using that metric 12 criteria as my outline. Condition codes are within generally acceptable tolerances. So when we talk about condition codes, we're talking about the components or the overall. So the deck, the super, the sub, each one of those get a 9 through 0. And you might notice this is different from the BRD6, where we cut away all of the individual 1 through 4 items, and now we just have a small group of the major components on the bridge. If it's a culvert, like the photos on the right, flexible or rigid, then you code the culvert 9 through 0. So those are our component ratings. Is the 9 through 0 within a generally acceptable tolerance? Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, let's break these out. So the 987s are good. Then we have the fairs, and then the poors, and then the criticals. In general, generally acceptable tolerances is within 1 of Mark Stockman, Mark Sherman, myself, Omar, those of us doing quality assurance like Kenny, within 1. And I have, not many times, but I have had a number where I said it was a 5 and the inspector said it was a 6, and I said it was not within general, not acceptable. So you can have ones within 1. The 5 to 4 line, for example, that 5 to 4 line is very important. And if I give it a 4 and you give it a 5, that is probably not an acceptable tolerance. So, but in general, within 1. And just a little teaser about the critical findings, the red box at the bottom, if you code something 2 or less, that is absolutely a critical finding. Anything above, maybe you get to decide, but absolutely we're drawing the line at 2 or less critical finding. So one thing we're trying to do to maximize consistency is embed within the code. So if you take your cursor and click on this drop down, and you take your cursor over to the manual icon, you will see a grouping of guidelines for coding the 9 through 0. And that's in AssetWise right now. Also, recently added is this recommended inspection procedure. So the inspector leaves very brief, succinct notes that, hey, we need hip boots here at a minimum. That's a helpful note for, so you're not getting out of the truck seeing for hip boots and then walking back. You just throw the hip boots on when you're in the truck. So when you open up the PDF, we have photos, we have helpful hints in how to code the 9 through 0s. So within generally acceptable tolerances, within 1. If we look at the second bullet, all notable deficiencies are identified. What does that mean? Well, Federal Highway, AASHTO, they both say that notable is 5 or less. And I would say because we're within 1 of Federal Highway, why don't you just jump it up to 6 and less? So notable deficiencies, if it's 5 and less, you need inspection comments. And with a 6, it's a good idea to have comments. So this is just the low bar. I know a lot of you are, for a 7, you're putting good comments in. We're just establishing the baseline here. And here's a paragraph from the document that we sent out earlier. It is considered good practice to include an appropriate description for components in all conditions. Appropriate justification of determined ratings means the lower the value of the condition code, the amount of report time and documentation increases to thoroughly describe its location, extent, and severity. While a condition code of 6 normally warrants a fairly brief narrative, as the condition worsens, more thorough documentation is required. This includes photos, sketches, and measurements. Fully document the identified deficiencies. Now, what's the big change here? We've always said 6s, you probably want comments, 5, you need comments. The big change is what's highlighted at the bottom. At a minimum, inspection comments specifically are required in asset-wise. So that is what's changed. We have this place that you have to put your comments, and when? Well, any NBI component, so deck super sub, deck channel, is rated 5 or worse. That is when comments are required. And so if we stay within this, all notable deficiencies are identified. In summary, it's 5 or less, those leading to a component rating of 5 or less. Another thing we're looking for ensuring that the inspection was done with high quality is, were certain areas accessed? Were certain areas not accessed? Over the life of the bridge, say the bridge has been out there 50 years, has there ever been a ladder put up at the bearings? Have we, for a fracture critical member, are we getting to both sides of the steel? So were certain areas not accessed? And lastly, is the report consistent with itself? That's where we want inspectors to begin looking at different parts of the report. So you have the component ratings, you have the element ratings, you have photos, and you have inspection comments. It should all correlate. It should all be saying the same message. Now for time and just simplicity of message, what I'm talking about is the comments, because that was the thing that was lacking, I guess, from the review from last year. And this idea with coding a 9 through 0, and I mentioned the 5 to 4 threshold is an important threshold. If we look at that 5 to 4 threshold, let me just throw a bone to you that a 4 pour is an adjective advanced. So for pre-stressed box beams in general, pre-stressed box beams, you have more than a quarter of the strands exposed. And exposed means not just visible, it means exposed to the elements. They could be underneath the lamination, underneath some longitudinal cracks. For section loss, it's more than half of the web is lost, or a quarter of the flange is lost. And if you're curious about how to measure section loss and what 50% means and what 25% means, watch the online refresher. I go into great detail, probably too much detail, and how to measure section loss. If you've already taken that class, watch that section again. For corrugated metal pipe, for our culverts, it's going to be holes. Scour advanced would be exposed vertical faces spread footing, or if you have deep foundations, you have one pile exposed up to 5 foot. That's an easy advanced. Reinforced concrete, it's 10% area of the deck or the slab or the abutment, 10% of it's spalled. And there's got to be spalling with some section loss on the rebar. You got to have 4 bars exposed with some section loss. So that's just a general rule when you get down to the 4 pour. All right, so the next section is condition codes are supported by narrative that appropriately justifies and documents the component. So this is right out of that document that was shared through email, and it's in AssetWise, and now it's in the GoToWebinar handouts. Write comments in AssetWise using language that is readily understood by the inspectors, engineers, planners, and maintenance staff. Comments must be sufficiently detailed for those in the inspection process to prioritize maintenance, scope repairs, perform preservation, and monitor the rate of change. Avoid the use of language that is confusing. Now, this is one thing that was all over the 2010 manual, and if the future manual ever gets completely updated, the location, extent, severity will be emphasized again. And every defect, so you have a bridge that's coded a 5 and you have a controlling defect. You have to identify where that defect is, and you have to identify how widespread the issue is, and you have to identify how severe the worst location is and how typical it is. So a helpful acronym is LES, less is more, location, extent, severity. And those of you that have the manual for bridge element inspection, you'll notice that I showed the percentages there that pop up on the rectangles. That is what 1% looks like. That would be an example of how widespread. The best way to communicate how widespread something is through percentage, through numbers. You got to make sure those numbers are accurate. So if you want to calibrate yourself, open up the manual for bridge element inspection, and there's a 1%, a 2%, a 5% that really helps calibrate. Let's look at some examples. So are these conditions supported by quality narrative? So in the red, we had a 2020, and it says resteel, sat, crack, tip, crack, rebar. The answer is no. A better description of that photo would be slab above the rear abutment at center line, 24 by 4 foot spall exposing primary bars, 14 bars with 360-degree exposure, cracking and wearing surface above. Big difference. So now we have an opportunity when you come up to a bridge like this, that's a 5 or even a 6, delete the bad comments. If that comment's not doing you any good, it's not doing the future inspector any good, make it better. So here's one that, and these are ones that I've seen. 2020 stains, tip, called Cody at, here's his phone number in 2017. So no maintenance blaming. Don't throw Cody under the bus. Now his phone number is a public record. 2021, 7 joints are leaking. Joint 10 is leaking full span with 3x6 area of rust staining and efflorescence, raining during 2021 inspection. That's a helpful note, especially if it's wet in 2021 and it's dry in 2022 without a new protective waterproofing. So 2020, there's no notes. No notes. That's no longer acceptable. If it's a 5 or worse, we got to have that into AssetWise. So here's the forward left wing wall failed, large section, 3 by 8 by 2, collapsed, sandstone blocks fallen out, condition not present in 2020. That is a helpful note. Now the photo really speaks volumes. If you have something failing, the photo usually speaks a little louder than words. In 2021, P3C3, so this is Pier 3, Column 3, spall, 6 by 3 by 2 inch and splash zone south face, 14 horizontal bars and 1 vertical bar exposed, 2 foot halo of DLAM, rust staining, and 1 foot diameter spall at bottom. Well, this goes back to some of the comments about photos and what Mark was talking about. The photo's terrible. So it's helpful to have a perspective photograph that's in focus and not blinded by the sun, and then maybe one that's a little up close to get an idea of how severe it is. So this is more of a knock on the photographs. And we have this one that instead of spall, we tell the next inspector where the spall is. Spall of unreinforced corner of top of forward abutment under beam, masonry plate, rear, right corner, undermined 3/4 inch. Inspection requires 24 foot ladder, hammer, and flashlight. All right, so that's the main criteria within the MBE, some examples of good and bad comments. Let's now move into the last criteria, the qualified team leader. Who is this person? They are the individual in charge of an inspection team, responsible for planning, preparing, performing the on-site inspection of the bridge. Ensure that a qualified inspection team leader is at the bridge at all times during each initial routine in-depth fracture critical and underwater inspection. This is a slice. This is figure 48 out of the 2014 inspection manual. There's 5 ways to become a team leader. You can look at that. And because metric, the team leader metric was reviewed and metric 12 was reviewed, you may notice you may be getting your 15th, 20th email from Susie Pettit in her office. She is hounding you. We need not just word of mouth that, oh, he's good or she's good. We need a paper trail. We need to document how you meet the minimums for team leader. So please excuse our thoroughness. We have to communicate to people outside of Ohio why you meet team leader qualifications. And there's 2 major criteria. There's the experience component, which I'm not going to get into, and the training component. The training I'm going to get into. So you have to have a comprehensive bridge inspection training class, and you have to have periodic bridge inspection refresher training. You have to have 2 classes. Now, let's look at the comprehensive bridge inspection training. To my knowledge, we're the only state that has taken upon ourselves that does our own training, that has done our own training since the early 90s. And I think it's a good thing. So if you have the ODOT level 1 and level 2, and that ODOT level 1, level 2 was after Federal Highway last approved it, so that's 2007, then that's an easy win. You meet the training certificate requirements. Or any previous classes before 2007, before it was unapproved, before it was approved, we need to have some sort of written documentation. So we've created a legacy clause checklist or a grandfather clause checklist, whatever you want to call it, for that 2006 NBI rule transition. So fill that out. Well, if you take the NHI 2-week comprehensive, that's approved. Or you can take the NHI 1-week comprehensive for PEs, that's also approved. So you got 4 options. If you don't have these options in AssetWise, April 15th, we're going to turn all team leaders down to team members. You'll still be able to get around the bridge. You'll still be able to edit reports. You'll still be able to move through the inspection, but you will not be able to submit for review. So that is what you're up against. Reach out to Susie Pettit in her office if you have questions. Periodic bridge inspection training. There's never been an easier time to take refresher training. Why? We have a one-time only COVID special where we have online refresher. There's 7 modules. You can take it in the comfort of your own home at your own pace. All you need to do is search the internet for ODOT LTAP e-learning bridge inspection refresher and take the course. It is good. COVID only. So once we're allowed to go back in person, we're going to shut off the refresher, the online refresher option. Now, what are we moving towards? Let me show you what Federal Highway is moving towards. So Kenny mentioned the SNBI, the new National Bridge Inspection Standards. One of the many fields in there that we're kind of preparing for, we're laying the groundwork for, is this field that is a National Certified Bridge Inspector number. We have to communicate nationally how you meet the national minimums. So that is why we are documenting. We're thoroughly calling everybody, emailing you, and getting everything in writing. And we're documenting it and storing it in AssetWise. So that is why the team leader requirement is a federal term. Program manager is a federal term. And so we are going to communicate them from the federal perspective by documenting everything. Even if you've been doing it for 50 years, yes, there are people that are still doing it for 50 years. We need a paper trail. So let's look at some numbers here. If you look at the left-hand side, the 2 towers, you've got county engineers. The blue are program managers that work for county engineers, and the orange are team leaders that work for county engineers. Sometimes county engineers both, but this is just what we have in AssetWise. And then you move to the right, you've got consultants. You move to the right again, you have ODOT. And you move to the right again, you have municipalities. So you can very quickly see how many hundreds and hundreds of team leaders and program managers we've had to go through. We appreciate your response time. If you want to call yourself out and say, you know what, I don't have it. I'm going to stop wasting your time. I don't have it. I can't produce it. The worst case scenario is we put you on a grace period where you take the level 1 and level 2 class or the NHI 2-week, and we make you a team member in AssetWise after that grace period. So who's using the legacy clause? We have on the county engineers, we have 28 using the legacy clause, program managers, and 20 team leaders. For consultants, we have 27 that are using the legacy clause, and a very small number, 5, using the legacy clause for team leaders. And in ODOT, we have 5 district bridge engineers using the legacy clause and 6 inspectors using the legacy clause. These are folks that have been inspecting since the 90s, extremely competent. They took all the classes they could take in the 90s and early 2000s, and now they're just taking periodic refresher training. Those ones we're not going to force you to take a 2-week class because you are already proven yourself competent. You were a team leader before, you're a team leader now. You've kept your refresher training up to date every 3 to 5 years. And municipalities, we have 5 using the legacy clause, program managers, and 1 using the legacy clause for team leaders. So here we are at the end of my talk. The inspection comments are required in AssetWise when NBI component ratings are 5 or worse. NBI component ratings, again, are the deck, super, sub, culvert, and channel. Following the standard nomenclature and labeling standards will help future inspectors quickly monitor element defects, quickly monitor component defects succinctly and comprehensively, especially now that we are off the island and in a new era where we only have the component ratings and only have the element ratings. We all need to do a better job documenting our locations and extent severity when we have a 5 fare or worse. This will help all of us. It will help all bridge personnel better allocate, plan, scope, and preserve bridge performance over time, not to mention safety. All right, let me look at, see if we have any questions. Okay. Yeah, my slides were not included. What I did include was the documentation slideshow, the documentation document. And the real reason I did not load that into the handout is because I didn't have it done yet. So yes, you will get that in an email. Is there any available NHI training anywhere this year? Looks like everything is booked for 2021. Yes, that is the truth. Level 1 and level 2, that's a reason why we want to get our level 1 and level 2 out there, is to clear some of the backlog. And our plan for the level 1, level 2 is we've completely rewritten it. We need to get approval, federal approval from Federal Highway. And once we get approval in the next, hopefully 5 to 10 months, we will turn around and start offering the class regularly. We'll have a level 1 1 month and a level 2 the next month, level 1 the following month, level 2. So we're gonna go through that as many times as we can until we clear the backlog. So I think us offering the class will also alleviate some of the pressure from NHI, and it will also give us flexibility in having the class offered more often in Ohio. The best way to document a team leader's experience is in AssetWise. So the requirement, there's 5 ways to become a team leader. The one most popular way is you have 5 years of bridge inspection experience and the class. Now, what is that bridge inspection experience? We want a lot of bridge inspection in there every year. And there's some other experience that you can have that is bridge related, like construction inspection, design, and those types of things that are bridge related, but we want predominant amount to be bridge inspection experience. And putting that in AssetWise is helpful. The ODOT, the inspection notes in AssetWise, ODOT is not going to delete old notes. We don't know which is, if you open up your inspection report and those notes that are in there and you are the inspector, you are basically signing your name to the notes that are in AssetWise. So if they're not accurate, or you're just perpetuating and keeping them like baggage you might be carrying with you that you think you can't throw away. Don't be a pack rat. Read through the notes, see if they make sense, see if they're helpful, see if they're beneficial. If they no longer apply, the deck was replaced. If they're not helpful and you need to reword them, go ahead and reword them. Go ahead and update them to something that's helpful and useful. Can you take the online refresher if you took one refresher 2 years ago to restart the clock? Yes, absolutely. There's enough new material in the online refresher that you could take that and reset the clock. That is a good question. And hopefully you'd learn something. Do comments have to be in a certain location and asset-wise? Yes, the document that I handed out, that we emailed, and that's in the handout, that document shows where comments should go. And for the components, the inspection comments need to go in the form labeled inspector comments. And there's memo boxes. There's a memo box for the deck, a memo box for the super, a memo box for the sub. That's where you're putting your comments. If you have a bridge that requires element level inspection, or you're doing state bridges, your comments, most of your comments are going to be in the elements, and everything non-element will be in the location I just described. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn the reins over to Jared. And I just figured out how to do this. Give me a second. There we go. All right, Jared, I think you're a presenter now.
Yep, I think we got it.
Nice.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Yep, I'll mute and hide, and you're on your way, Jared.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jared Bax. I work for Mike Brokaw in ODOT Central Office of Structures. And what I'll be talking to you briefly today is about our improvement plan for the critical findings procedure. So I'll briefly go over, kind of what the 3 steps were for the Federal Highway Improvement Plan, and then I'll kind of show our new critical finding form and asset-wise, and give some points about how to fill that out properly, how and when to fill that out. And then Omar will talk more about some actual critical finding examples, and kind of where, good examples and bad examples of communication, where that broke down in relaying these critical findings to either the control authorities or Federal Highway, and why we're kind of in this improvement plan to begin with. So I've already gotten some of your questions about critical findings that I'll answer through this presentation, and I'm sure Omar will answer some of your questions as well. But at the end of mine and Omar's presentations, we can answer any outstanding critical finding questions. So let's get started. So like I said, this is our critical findings improvement plan, metric 21. I realized after Kenny's presentation that I'd put improvement plan on my title slide, and then I had put PCA everywhere else. So I realized we're not actually on a plan of correction action, we're actually on an improvement plan. We're not that bad. So I changed all of the PCAs to IP, but so that'll be a little different than the slides given in the handout. So first, what I'd like to talk about quickly is just metric 21. And this is the critical findings metric, basically the criteria and the three criteria for compliance there. So basically, to be compliant with this metric 21, we need to establish a critical finding procedure and make sure that they are addressed in a timely manner. So, those familiar with SMS, will remember that these were handled within the maintenance needs. And sometimes it could kind of get buried a little bit, or not relayed, in a timely manner. So that was something where we were, a little non-compliant on. And then the second criteria is federal highways periodically notified of the actions taken to resolve and monitor critical findings. And I don't really think that was quite happening in SMS. So to be compliant, documented procedure has to be established and implemented to assure critical findings are addressed in a timely manner. So that's kind of what we've done, and I'll explain in the next few slides. The period for federal highway notification of actions taken is established and followed. So Kenny kind of mentioned previously that, this new guidance could possibly be within 24 hours. Federal highway needs notice of critical findings. So since we have established new email alerts, which I'll cover in the next slide, federal highway is pretty much getting notified instantly when a critical finding is opened in ASSET-wise. So we're kind of ahead of the ball there if it ever does go to a 24-hour notice. And then all critical findings are addressed and documented in accordance with the procedure. So that's kind of where the critical finding form and ASSET-wise comes into play, and we will go over that as well. So like Kenny said, Metric 21 was one of their reviews this year, and for critical finding review, they Federal Highway sampled 16 bridges statewide with condition ratings less than 3. Their review findings were that basically we need more timely action from bridge owners when critical findings are identified, a need for better communication of critical findings between inspectors, bridge owners, and Federal Highway, and we need to develop a critical findings form. So we were given 3 milestones for an improvement plan by Federal Highway, and we'll cover those one by one. First is kind of what I wanted to show to refresh everybody is our critical findings flowchart. This is in the 2014 Bridge Inspection Manual, Chapter 2. I think right at the beginning of Chapter 2, we talk about critical findings. And so this is basically our way to kind of step someone through the process of what to do when a critical finding is discovered. So just going down through this, importantly right at the top, the first box there is a normally scheduled inspection. So that's important for critical findings, is that this is, a critical finding is a new change or something that is not documented in the previous year's inspection that is found during a routine inspection. So we specifically state in the manual that damage inspections or bridge hits that are relayed to you through either the police or the traveling public, those are not critical findings. A critical finding is a new change that has been found during a routine or a scheduled inspection. We had a question about if critical findings should be done on just MBIS bridges, the federal FHWA structures, or on all Ohio structures, and the answer to that is yes, that these should be done on all bridges in the state of Ohio. That's our own policy as well. So the critical finding form, when I get into what qualifies as a critical finding, that should be filled out for any bridge in the state, 10 feet or greater. So basically, during a normally scheduled inspection, if you think you found a critical finding, the first thing that should be done, the team leader should have an immediate conversation with the control authority just to, establish, is this a critical finding? Do we agree? A verbal consensus. And then if that consensus is yes, there should be a couple immediate actions taken. So the team leader or the person at the bridge, their responsibility, immediately is to make sure the bridge is safe or make sure that, there's no danger to the traveling public. So whether that means, temporarily closing the bridge until action can be taken, closing a lane, setting up cones, whatever that would be, if you guys, establish that we have a critical finding, there should be an action taken to assure public safety within, hours, by the end of the day. That's immediate. Immediate doesn't mean, 2 weeks later, a week later. There should be an immediate action taken to assure public safety. The control authority, or the program manager, their immediate responsibility is to contact the necessary public safety authorities, so immediate threat to public is averted. And then in the short term, so meaning a couple weeks to a month or so, basically ensures corrective or protective measures are implemented in a timely manner to safeguard the traveling public. And then for the team leader or the inspector, within 2 weeks, we would like the inspection report completed along with the critical finding form and asset-wise, and then submitted for review. And then, during the normal review process, other actions could be made, more permanent or long-term solutions to the critical finding. So basically, our improvement plan milestone 1 from Federal Highway was to set up automatic email notifications and asset-wise to alert the owner, ODOT QA managers, and the division whenever the condition rating, so basically item 58, 59, 60, 61, 62 drops below a 3. So that's deck, super, sub, culvert, or channel. If any of those 9 through 0s drops to a 2, then we should be opening a critical finding. And so what I have here, the screenshot here, is basically the generic automated email response that you will receive from AssetWise if you open a critical finding form, or if you start to fill out the critical finding form. So I'm sure some of you have seen this before, but basically when you will be getting one of those emails is if 1 or 2 triggers is set off. So basically, like I said, deck, super, sub, culvert, or channel summary is brought down to a 2 or lower, or item 275A and asset-wise is filled out. So 275A is one of the first fields on the critical finding form, reasons to justify a critical finding. So, it doesn't have to be a 2 for there to be a critical finding. So, one of those two triggers should catch, when a critical finding is open, either the drop in GA or, the item 275. And then basically what that's showing at the bottom there is who would be receiving this automated email. And so basically you have the report creator, the report owner, so you're basically your bridge inspector, your team leader, and then the assigned user. So, whoever that is assigned to for review. So basically the team leader and the program manager will be getting, or the reviewer will be getting this email. And then also you can see at the bottom, we basically have ODOT central office, Federal Highway, county, and muni program managers as well receive these emails. So then milestone 2 is basically to create a critical finding form. So create a critical finding form and AssetWise that contains the same fields in the Federal Highway Critical Finding database. So basically, like Kenny mentioned earlier, this critical finding form was added to AssetWise. You can see the screenshot there on the right of the Forms tab from AssetWise with critical finding down at the bottom. So that's accessible through 2 ways, either from inside the inspection report or from the Edit Asset Values tab. So obviously, if you're the team leader and you're doing your routine inspection, you're going to access this critical finding report, within the inspection report. But then, once the report has been, submitted or, approved, further steps down the line, you could still access that same critical finding form within the Bridges Edit Asset Values tab to make, updates or to update the process of the critical finding. And then, the fields were created to match the Federal Highway Critical Findings database. So there's about 15 to 20 fields that need filled out, and those are all created to coincide directly with Federal Highway's Critical Findings database. So what we have here is a screenshot of the Critical Findings form in AssetWise. It should be filled out if a critical finding is found during a routine inspection, like I mentioned. The inspection report with critical finding form filled out should be submitted for review within 2 weeks. That's standard policy. for a critical finding, and then instructions and guidance for coding are included on the form. So it's a little tricky and it's a little, non-intuitive at points. So I wanted to kind of add some instructions on the top and then also put on the right, what can kind of constitute a critical finding. And that's directly from the bridge inspection manual. And then updates, like I said, can be made through edit asset values once the inspection report is approved. So just looking quickly at this form that we have here, this is just kind of the top of the form. There's more to it when you're in asset-wise. But basically the first thing you'll do is, fill out the data discovery, which in all reality, if it's during a routine inspection, will be, the same day as your inspection. And then there's that 275 field we talked about, that if that first drop down is filled out with a reason for a critical finding, that's, one of the triggers to generate an email. There are multiple fields that have kind of 3 drop downs, and that's basically just, to allow you to add more than one reason for that question. You don't have to have, all 3 filled out, like in the case of 275 there, but we wanted to give options in case there were multiple reasons for a selected answer. Then there's also fields like you can see 276, or, if you answer other to something where it asks for explanation. So please, in those boxes, please give a detailed explanation of the critical finding. We had a question about if a critical finding report needs filled out every year for a bridge that's a 3. So the answer to that is no. Like I've already mentioned, we're basically looking for, something that, drastic change since the previous inspection. And also, we're kind of talking about once it drops below a 3 to automatically open a critical finding. So if you have a 3 on your system, or even like a railroad bridge that is something you're just monitoring and you have it a 3 year after year, if nothing's drastically changing year after year, that can stay a 3 and it doesn't have to be a critical finding. And then one other question was that does a bridge require posting once you bring a bridge down to a 4 or below? And what we state in the manual, that basically it requires a new load rating, so not necessarily would be posted, but once you bring a bridge down to GA4 or below, we do require a new load rating of that structure. So basically, to sum the critical finding form up, when responding to a critical finding, like I said, inspector immediately communicates the critical finding to the control authority. An immediate action should be taken within hours of discovery. So we've kind of set limits on different types of actions. Immediate, is the first. Omar will get into these more in his presentation, but there should be an immediate action taken, within hours when a critical finding is found, just to make sure this bridge is safe, even if that means closing the structure completely. And then next, document actions taken. So this is very important. So that's kind of where the critical finding form comes in, is that if you are filling out this inspection report in the field, the critical finding form is a great place to document everything that you're finding. But if by some reason you're not using, you go back to the office or something to fill your reports out, and you're not directly at the bridge, please take very detailed notes about why do I think this is a critical finding? What am I seeing at the bridge that leads me to think this? What justifies this? And then what have I done immediately? Who did I call? Who were the authorities notified? All things like that are things that could be documented and put into the critical finding form. The more detail, the better, honestly. And then lastly, fill out the critical finding form and submit the inspection report for review within 2 weeks. So then our last milestone was to present a webinar communicating this improvement plan and what we've done. So that's obviously due in about a week, and we're doing that today, so it satisfies that. And then lastly, what I wanted to mention was, I know Mike's already talked about our bridge inspection refresher training. But we do have a section, a module on pre-stressed box beams where I cover the critical finding form and kind of walk through the steps of filling it out for a specific pre-stressed box beam example. So like Mike said, once we get back to in-person training, that refresher course is gone. So to take that, like he said, just Google ODOT e-learning, and then you just have to have a My ODOT account, which if you've done any e-learning through ODOT before, you should already have. So now I will turn it over to Omar, and he will talk about critical finding examples and good and bad documentation.
Okay, Jared. Thank you very much, Jared. That sets up my presentation very well. Let me share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see my presentation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So today I'll be talking about implementing the critical findings reports with the municipal bridges. My name is Omar Abu Hajar. I work in the Office of Structural Engineering. I coordinate and I do the quality assurance program management for the municipal bridges in Ohio. As mentioned before by Jared and others and Mike, things to keep in mind when implementing the critical findings. Keywords, public safety, that's essential. I think we all strive to protect and preserve public safety. Everything we do in the bridge inspection world ultimately leads to public safety. So that's something to keep in mind always. So critical findings are very, very important, and we cannot take the bridge all the way through cradle to almost grave and drop the ball at the last year. Maybe the bridge is just hanging in there, and the inspector finds something critical with the bridge, and we have to address that all the way until the bridge is decommissioned close to traffic and decommissioned safely. So some more to keep in mind is resolved. When we talk about what's the meaning of resolved in the critical findings, it means action have taken place to stabilize the immediate safety concern discovered during routine inspection. And I overemphasize on routine inspection. Critical findings are not something discovered casually. It has to be discovered during the routine inspection. So it's an official report, official process that we go through that documents the critical findings. Also, another thing to keep in mind is if the inspector finds something critical with the bridge, he can close the bridge immediately if that affects the public safety. If there is a concern about keeping that bridge open for 1 minute, he has the option to close the bridge before even contacting the control authority. Keeping in mind that it is a good idea to, as Jared mentioned, negotiation is one of the items that the inspector has to do with the control authority. So we're not saying that lightly. I mean, this is a very serious action to take. It is best to discuss that with the control authorities and the owners of the bridge before taking such action. But that is an option if that means protecting the public safety. That would be a good way to ensure that nobody is crossing the bridge if discovered to be very unsafe. Okay. So to implement those critical findings action steps, we put them under 3 different categories, and these are timeline categories: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. In general, I highlighted in red how long it takes. So stage 1, something that is immediate, that should take hours. That including closing the bridge, or maybe possibly closing a lane, maybe a beam underneath, carrying the load, and the vehicular traffic loads is being degraded so far that you know it requires a lane closure, not just a closing a bridge. Or stage 2 requires days, and I set examples here. For example, weight limits, weight restrictions, posting. That generally federal highway new requirement 30 days, not to exceed 30 days. And I also encourage the owners and also inspectors when they recommend posting the bridge is to recommend not to exceed. It is not the limit where the owner can wait until the day of the 30th day to post the bridge. I mean, we would rather to post the bridge tomorrow if we can. So that's something to keep in mind, that post the bridge as soon as possible, not to exceed 30 days. It also might take days to do a detour or perform emergency repairs, as I will show here later on in some of the examples that I have that happened on the municipal side of the bridges. And finally, the permanent response that could mean that bridge replacement or channel improvement, and that could take depends on the funding and the planning process of that locality. It could take months to years, depending. I know some bridges has been 5 years in the process until now. I'm hearing about the bridges being replaced. So that could take some time, but that can be part of the critical findings. There's something discovered, and then the city says, oh yes, we were planning to replace the bridge in 3 years or 2 years, and but that will be considered an action item also. Here is an example. This happened about a year ago. That was discovered during a routine inspection. So this is I'm going to call this example 1, and this has through corrosion in the web, in the connection between the web and the flange near the abutment, so that affects the load carrying capacity. I suspect the culprit is the stay-in-place metal form with the asphalt wearing surface filled in the pan that cracks usually and then collects the water, and very soon the stringers and the beams get corroded, and over the years they rust through, affecting the load carrying capacity. So that's the action item, was to restrict the lane. So this happened due to salting of the roadway and maybe the rainwater and whatnot, the dripping on the side. So the exterior beam or the beam next to it gets affected the worst. Also keep in mind that the cracks in the asphalt, as I indicated in the previous slide, they collect water, and the water stays in the pan for years and years, and that leads to corrosion throughout the bridge. But it looks like in this case, the exterior beams and the one next to it was affected by the corrosion and the lane restriction. And as a result, also the inspector recommended the load rating. So load rating was performed and the bridge was posted. And it was found that the corrosion was, for the interior beams, was not affected as bad. So it only required posting of the emergency vehicles. Here is the items and the timeline of what happened to example 1. Notified on this date in December, early December, immediate action completed. So the barrels were installed a day later. So that's good. And then the load rating happened about a month later. Load rating done, and the bridge was posted. So after so many days, about 20 days or so. So in conclusion, in my mind, I can say that the action steps were reasonable, took reasonable time. Example 2, this is a non-MBI bridge. It's a culvert actually. The inspector thought that he would like to file critical findings because there are action items that should take place after discovering this corrosion in the main rebar of the top slab. And so they took measurement and determined the amount of corrosion in the rebar. And that's an overview. It looks like it's even though it's localized, this is under the traffic, so it's possibly a wheel line of a truck could pass over this main reinforcement. So the inspector recommended a load rating. The bridge was load rated and was posted. And if we trace back what happened, we look at critical funding was done in 2018, July. Load rating did not take until months after that. The posting was never documented in our system. It was discovered, or it was found it was documented during the next inspection, the same day that it was filed, the critical findings. When I look at the timeline in general, I just say that time took, it was unknown. In my mind, this is unsatisfactory performance. If we use the time as a performance measure, this is not acceptable for that locality. It should have taken very decisive, clear steps on the timeline, taken days to post the bridge, 30 days, no more than 30 days. Even though it is non-NBI, I run the non-NBI bridges parallel to the NBI bridges, so the safety requirements, the 23 metrics that lead to safety, protecting safety of the bridges, I like to use the same requirement for the non-NBI. At least we try to do that. And looking at this, it did not follow this at all. So I found this unacceptable for this bridge. This is example number 3. This is a culvert I am familiar with because we discovered this a few years back. It had corrosion holes. We talked to the city. The city performed some repairs. We load rated the bridge or the culvert for them. So this photo really, it is not clear, but actually this is a corrugated metal pipe culvert, and this is a corrosion hole. This stick, it looks like it goes in like 3.5 to 4 feet behind the culvert. Here's another picture of the structural fill coming through the culvert. So we're losing that, and that affects the carrying capacity of the structure. More photo here of the fill, and looks like they tried to repair it here by putting plates. So this happened last year, I think December or November. The city did the repairs. They closed the roadway, repaired, excavated behind, performed the repairs, put the pavement back in place. Here is what the excavation looks like and what the plate looks like for the repair. So this one, the inspector did a good job, and the city also did a good job communicating and acting on the action steps required. So it was they were notified in 11/16/2020. The same day, 3 hours later, the bridge was closed. Within days, they completed the repairs. Like three more days, the bridge was reopened to traffic. And the city has that in mind. So in this year, in August this year, the bridge will be replaced. Action steps took reasonable time. This is again non-NBI bridge, but it's a classic example of how the city should treat those critical findings. They acted on it, and it was success. Nobody was harmed. Nothing happened. Another bridge was discovered for critical findings. This one relates to Scour. You can see here, it's the footing was undermined on this side. Here, it's almost being undermined. So it looks like there is some kind of degradation of the channel. The channel bottom should be somewhere here where my mouse is, about 1 foot below this line. So you can see about maybe we lost about 3 feet in the flow line, some deposit here of the soil. Inspector trying to quantify the amount of scour, see how far the scour goes under the footing. And here's what the city did after they performed the repairs, put riprap and put some kind of a pedestal here in front of the washed, undermined footing. Another photo. This took a few days to do the scour repair, but that's also understandable. Looks like about a month and a half, about 6 weeks to do the repairs, and this is considered, you know, considering what they have to do. It looked like it was reasonable. Okay, and then moving on to the final example. This was discovered last year. Again, it's corrosion. Abutment wall is here. This is the end diaphragm. Rusting through, could possibly affect the carrying capacity. I don't know where the bearing pad is. Maybe it's somewhere here away, but it's nonetheless, it's very thinning. You know, the whip is very thin, so the load carrying capacity is reduced to almost nothing. So it was discovered in November 2020. On the same day, the inspector met with the, so that's good job for the inspector. And he recommended to implement as soon as possible. A steel plate was welded on the web, and that took about a month, about 30 days or so. So that looked like it was reasonable time frame for this example. And then, so those were the classic example, and nothing happened. What the Federal Highway found last year is the feature example that I have, and this is the, you know, my presentation is mainly about this one. So this one was a pony truss critical finding report. Facts sheet about this bridge is it's a 123-foot single span welded weathering steel. So you can maybe see the alarms here. Welded weather, it's a weathering steel built in 1984 only. So you can imagine, you know, how many days, how many years was that? About 35 years or so. And now we have a critical findings on the bridge. Another fact about this bridge, it serves very minimal amount of people. It's a city bridge on a cul-de-sac, so it's only serves 4 houses. Nonetheless, we need to provide safe access to them. So we have a responsibility for them to protect their safety, make sure the bridge can provide, you know, the access for them in and out of their home. The deck is 16-foot wide, single lane, 2-way traffic. So it's, yeah, makes sense. It's a low traffic, so make it narrow. This slide, I don't expect you to read all this. Just to note that this is just to know the geometry of the truss, the floor beam, 4 stringers. There is a corrugated steel stay in place metal form again that, you know, the column, and then filling this pan is an asphalt wearing surface. So you can imagine the problem we're going to have. Weathering steel also, keeping in mind. Another background is we look at the historical general appraisal, tracked it down since 2009, 4A. We load rated the bridge in 2016. We made it a 4P, and then in 2020, that's where the critical finding was found, and it remained 3P from the year before. Something to keep in mind is when you see a 3P but critical finding, that means it's not the super or the sub that affect the GA. It was actually the deck that caused this issue with us. Inspector notes here. Make sure I stay on time. Okay. the deficiencies of the bridge taken, these are inspector note taken from the inspection report in 2020. Stringers were bad, 50% corrosion. There are corrosion holes. Right hand is worse than left hand, and we're considering this is south abutment, standing on the south abutment looking north, right hand side. Floor beams is average, 30%. Indicated that there were some corrosion holes even in the cord. I wasn't able to see that when I went to the site, but it's expected for a weathering steel. Deck is okay, and that's the note the inspector have. Deck is unstable with full depth potholes and exposure of metal form with corrosion. Right hand side. So the right hand side is the worst side. And also another issue with this is the embankment in the northeast corner of the bridge is unstable. And I'll show you here later a slide of the bridge, of the truss, the elevation view. So this slide to show you that this deck is really far gone, yes, and then any wheel that will go over this, like especially a truck, will go through it. So it is a critical 2 for the deck is very reasonable. It cracked and everything, so you can see why the bridge or the deck is corroded so badly like this. This is the northeast corner of the bridge, and this is the slippage of the embankment. So part of the roadway is going away, washing away, or moving away from the bridge. This documents the condition of the deck from below. Stringers look badly corroded. Holes in the stringers, thinning in the flanges. The bearing point on the floor beam is the flange is almost gone. This is before, so this posting sign, when we did that in 2016 in compliance with federal requirements, when we had the SHVs and whatnot. So this is the previous, you can see that just before the critical findings, this trucks could use, and the 5C1 could use this bridge with this condition of the deck. So that was unsafe. And this is what the city implemented. This is the right side, and these metal plates were used to distribute the load and also to span over the holes in the deck. This is the view of the northeast corner of the bridge, where the embankment is slipping away from the roadway. This is also the revised posting sign. The inspector recommended 3 tons. Make it more safe and to allow these people to drive back to their homes. This is the elevation view I talked about. You can see that the bridge is way up in the air. It's very high. Now, the truss is really in good condition, and so the only bad thing is the deck and the stringers. Again, this is the type, size, and location of this bridge was not, this truss was not right for this location, and that's so the embankment is slipping from here. The channel is also slipping into the water. Way up in the air, the abutment is tall. It's very, very unstable bridge. So this slide represents the communication breakdown between the inspectors, us, OSE, and the municipality, the owner of the bridge. Discovery was in July 2020. And the inspector wanted to get hold of the city before they filed the report to reach into negotiation with the city to get into consensus as the manual recommended. They weren't able to get hold of them, so they held off on the critical findings. Federal Highway inquired about the critical findings and why this is not happening. I contacted the inspector. We got the ball rolling. We asked him to send emails, call the city, find any way to get hold of them. So they filed the critical findings in asset-wise. Attempted to contact the city, and this time looks like they sent emails, couple emails. Finally, they got hold of the city. The city promised to take action, so that was a month later. They just promised, and the key word is promise. So the consultant, 3 days later, they reach out to the city. They ask him what happened. The city promised again. So it was obvious the city was not acting on it, and I'm actually tired reading these action item or these items to you guys. I don't know about you. I'm tired already. And if you saw the picture earlier, it's just cones and moving some steel plates. It wasn't really a drastic action steps to take. Federal Highway again contacted us. So back and forth. By the time it was said and done, it took 50 days to implement the action steps, and it was just basically just orange cones and steel plates. In the end, we hope that municipal entities must act expeditiously to protect public safety. They need to do better than 50 days, a lot better actually. And I hope you guys on the municipal side see that as lessons learned and work with us and work with Federal Highway to make it better for the public and make it safer. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but we're playing Russian roulette here. If we take chances with safety, who knows, it could hurt us. And then I don't really want to be in position to explain to anybody that what happened and what's the reason, what went wrong. I'd rather that we all working together for the same objective and working diligently to protect the public safety. Really, that's my message to the municipalities and all the public agencies. And as far as our action step is, the Federal Highway recommended the improvement in the reporting process, and that's what Jared talked about earlier. Thankfully, that we have that process and we have the notification, and now we can see it on the radar screen right away. The minute the inspector files critical findings, we're tracking it, all of us tracking it to make sure it gets done timely. With that, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I will be glad to entertain any questions you guys might have.
Hey, Omar, thanks. This is Mike. I've got a question. After performing a load rating that may require a temporary closure of the bridge, does a critical finding form need to be filled out then, or is that only after an inspection?
The critical findings should be filed after the inspection. Once the inspector decides that there are immediate action steps need to be taken to keep this bridge operating, the report should be filed. It can be closed after. Now the key word is closure. There are two fields in the bottom of the form that Jared presented earlier. Those can be filled out after the action steps have taken place, and these are the immediate action steps. And there's another field for the more permanent, such as replacement of the bridge.
Yeah, I think if you consider being on notice in a way, if someone does a load rating and they realize there's not enough capacity and the temporary closure is required, don't wait. Don't wait for the next inspection. Initiate that process and get the temporary closure in place. Would be my answer. Do everything in light of public safety.
I concur.
Got a comment. I don't know if you remember example 1, Omar, but example 1 comment is doesn't appear to be critical finding since it didn't happen overnight. Should have been documented in previous inspection.
Let me go back to example 1. I think that the one has corrosion.
Yeah, I think it's that string or steel beam with the hole.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. I mean, I'm just gonna build on that. A flashlight and a hammer are your friends and maybe the best inspection tools out there. I concur with this comment. I'm guessing this was hidden by corrosion, or an inspector was doing an inadequate job, or it was an interpretation and it was a 3 in the previous inspection. So whatever the case, it's now moved to a 2. So we've drawn the line from a 3 to a 2, and then that now is a critical finding. You could have a critical finding be a 3, but we just decided to draw the line right at where the adjective critical exists on that 9 scale. You can call this a critical finding with a 3. We're not requiring it, but certainly it's something that can be done.
I think some of those are discretionary depending on the opinion of the inspector. I tell the inspector, if you walk away from this bridge, are you guaranteeing that next year, like if you give me a frequency of 12 months, in 12 months, are you guaranteeing to come back and the bridge is still safe and functioning as intended? If the answer is no, okay, you better think about critical findings. What do you need to do to tell the owner what action items you should take?
Yep.
If the answer is yes, walk away. Okay, you're good.
I've got another comment. Last example, great examples, by the way, good photos. That last example was a good instance of where a phone call needed to be made rather than relying only on email. Email, great, it's great for documentation, but phone logs work too. I concur. I agree.
Yeah. With that city, we tried different ways. It was just a challenge to get hold of them. We leave voicemails. Nobody answers, and we leave voicemails and no callbacks. So the email is a good way to document. I mean, yeah, there is a big advantage to emails because you can show on this day I sent this request, and then on this date I received the response on it. You can document that. With the voicemail, it's not documentable except just writing a log about it.
Just as an overarching note, the inspection program began with a tragedy. So the whole inspection program should be considered in light of public safety as primary, and then secondary, monitoring things so they don't become unsafe, or monitoring things so we can take care of them and allocate funds appropriately. So always consider public safety and why the whole program began back in the 60s and 70s. I've got no further questions, gentlemen. I think let's go ahead and take an 8-minute break, and we will start Amjad at the 11 o'clock hour, right on time. So just take a shortened break so we can start at 11 and keep on time. So we'll resume back at 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see me and also see my presentation. It's 11 o'clock, and thank you very much for staying for my presentation. I can promise you one thing, my presentation is the last presentation for the day. My name is Amjad Waheed. I work in Office of Structural Engineering in Bridge Rating and Bridge Management section. Since the start of this webinar in the morning, we have been hearing one word again and again, and that is public safety. Public safety means the safety of the public who's using that asset or using that bridge or culvert. And that means the vehicles traveling on those assets. So I do not mean to less emphasis on the safety. Safety is very important, and that's the reason we all are over here. Well, I would like to add two more things, into that goal, public safety goal. One is preserving the assets. These assets are public assets for which we are responsible to take care of them. And we should also make sure that we preserve the assets. We want to make sure that the assets also remain usable and safely open for the use of public. So to make sure that we achieve those objectives, to have these assets open for the public safely, we need to make informed decisions. And to make informed decisions, we need to find out what is their load carrying capacity of those structures are. And that's where the bridge load rating comes into. So the definition of bridge load rating is to find out what is the safe load carrying capacity of the asset or that highway bridge is. Mike also mentioned in his presentation what manual of AASHTO manual of bridge evaluation, and the chapter 6 of the manual also talks about the load rating safety. Tim mentioned about the general theme of the webinar, and the general theme of the webinar was compliance and consistency. So I will just gonna give you a brief update about on those two things. First thing is compliance. Compliance means compliance with all the rules and regulations, federal guidelines, and the state laws. So one of those memos which came from FHWA back in 2013, FHWA require us, we should start including special hauling vehicles in our load rating vehicles. Just to refresh, the load rating is done for the bridges which can legally travel on highway bridges without any causing any distress or any damage to them, the legal vehicles. And if there is any vehicle whose load is more than what is legally allowed to travel in the state and the bridges, they require special permits. And that is a separate topic, the permits. So we are talking about the legal vehicles which can travel. So those special hauling vehicles, they were all legal vehicles, but their configuration was such a way that we have to look into them and make sure our bridges are safe for them to travel on them. So this memo came in 2013, and ODOT, after doing a lot of research, and we started working on load rating over bridges for special hauling vehicles. The first PCA was signed between ODOT and FHWA in November 2018. And in that PCA, which was originally signed, we identify, according to FHWA memo, there are about slightly less than 3,900 bridges in the state of Ohio, which required to be checked or load rated for special hauling vehicles. The duration was 24 months for that PCA, and if it was starting was 2018, so the end of 2020 was the completion, supposed to be completion of that original PCA. But you all know that, what happened in 2020. There was a pandemic, there was special extraordinary circumstances. We were all went to home, there were technology challenges, there were not enough resources available. So without going into a lot of details of those things, what happened that when we came close to the end of the PCA date, we found out that there were about 481 bridges in all over state, which we were not able to complete for special hauling vehicle load rating. So we had another negotiations and meetings with FHWA, and we in FHWA, we both agreed to go into a revised completion date for the PCA. So the revised completion date was reset to December 31st, 2021. So in other words, we got one more year to complete all the load rating of special hauling vehicles. Just to give you what the breakdown of those 481 bridges were, there were about 168 ODOT bridges, 293 county bridges, and about 20 Ohio Turnpike bridges, which were still needed to be load rated for special hauling vehicles. So these three action items, they were agreed upon with ODOT. The first one was ODOT will hire, since we were in the hiring freeze during 2020, and if any employees, they decided to move on, they decided to leave the ODOT job, we were not allowed to fill that position during 2020. So the first action item which we agreed upon, we're gonna, as soon as the revenues condition becomes better, ODOT will hire 3 consultants to perform the special hauling vehicles rating on the straight structures. So, and the target was to complete that action item by June 30th. So at this time, I am glad to report that that action has been completed. We have already gone through the scrutiny and the bidding process of the different consultants companies, which expressed their desire to be hired as a consultant, to provide as a consultant engineer to us. And we have already selected a company which will provide us the 3 consultants. The second action item was we have to complete about 156 ratings for special hauling vehicles by June 30th. Those 156 load bridges mostly were county bridges and a small number of Ohio Turnpike bridges. And I'm pretty sure we will be able to achieve those targets because some of those load ratings were already in the process. And the last action item in this revised PCA is to complete the complete load rating of 481 bridges by December 2021, and which we are very confident with the additional resources we will be able to do that. So the 3, as I said, that 3 consultant employees will be hired, and they will start with the next fiscal year in July, and we will intend to complete all the load ratings on special hauling vehicles by the end of 2021. The second theme of today's webinar was about the consistency. During this pandemic, we also switched from old SMS application to new SRWise application. And this application, during this process, we made several inventory changes to change so that we are inconsistent with the rest of the nation. One of the change was all highway bridges were inventoried with the route on the bridge. So if a bridge is carrying a highway route, that route will become the inventory route. For the clearances purposes, as ODOT and some of the counties and cities, they also do the permitting for the oversized, over-dimension loads. So we have the fields, we created the fields to store the clearances, which can be used for permitting the oversized loads. Just keep in mind that there are some clearance fields, NBI clearance fields in the asset-wise, but those are not meant to be used for permitting purposes. So for the permitting purposes, we created those extra fields. I will show you in a second. For consistency purposes, we also said that all the log point of the bridge and the coordinates should be at the start of the bridge. And when you are traveling on a route, on a road in the upstation direction, in the direction in which the mile points are increasing, the first abutment joint is your start of the bridge. And this is the consistency we decided we're going to bring to all the bridges in Ohio. As far as the future updates in the asset-wise, we know that there is some data in the asset-wise which is required to be updated more frequently. And for that purposes, we also working on a roadway inventory updater. What the roadway inventory updater will do, that will make sure that the route information and all the related attributes to the routes, which includes classification of the route or the log points, to make it in compliance with the roadway inventory data. And we will develop that automated updates of the route information. And that will also bring the traffic data. If you have seen the data in the asset-wise, some of the traffic data are several years old. And we know that we have more updated information. So we have in the future, we have started developing an app which will automatically update those information about the routes, which comes from the roadway inventory, and the traffic data, which comes from the traffic. And at this time, that application only gonna update on the state bridges, So the consistency, as I said, that we have now following this policy that the bridge location or the bridge coordinates and the log point should be a start of the bridge. So this is one of the examples. This is the bridge over a railroad. So these are the bridges if they are going crossing over a railroad, if we are traveling in the up station. So when we hit the first joint, that is where we should have the coordinates, and that's where we should have the log point. So this is a good example of how the coordinates and log points should be stored in the asset-wise to be consistent. This is an example of a local road. This is a local road. This is a bridge carrying a local road going over Interstate 675. So this bridge, which is going over 675, this will have the County Road 670 as inventory route, because that is the highway, that is the road going on the bridge. And the start of the bridge going to become our location to store the log point and the coordinates. So this is the example of a local road. And I'm hopeful, if we all follow this practice in doing our inventory of the bridges, all our data will be very much consistent. I also mentioned about the clearances. Clearances in the asset-wise. So the clearances in the asset-wise, there are two types of clearances. One is NBI clearances, others are Ohio clearances. Ohio clearances are primarily meant to do the permitting, to make sure that when we do a permit oversized load, these clearances are used. And these clearances should be very accurate. Ohio clearances are located in two places: Ohio Bridge Inventory Form and Under Record Form. Under Record Forms only when there is a record when there is a route under the bridge. And NBI clearances are also on those two forms. We are looking at the Ohio clearances. We have the clearances in when there is a divided highway. We have clearances in both directions. We have fields to store the clearances in cardinal and non-cardinal direction. In each direction, we need a minimum vertical clearance under that structure and the horizontal clearance. And similarly, on the non-cardinal direction, if there is not a divided highway, then we only store the cardinal clearances in the cardinal direction. So this is the route. This is the example of a cardinal and non-cardinal divided highway when we need the clearances on both sides. So looking at the clearances, since this bridge is a highway bridge, so clearances on the inventory route, which is on the bridge, they're gonna be stored in the Ohio inventory form, and they're gonna be stored over here. And we have a cardinal, non-cardinal direction, vertical clearances, and horizontal clearances. And for the route which is underneath, they will go on the under record form, and we have the same fields. As I said that those clearances are on the Ohio bridge inventory form in the asset-wise and under clearances form. And every clearance is with respect to the route. What is the clearance above the route? Or what is the clearance, horizontal clearance on the route? These are how the clearances has been stored. And to be consistent, this should be across the state for every bridge. So like I said that the clearances on the inventory routes, they belongs to what the route has been stored as a inventory route in the bridge inventory form. This is the example of a county road. If the county road is used as a inventory route, then the clearances should belong to that county road. If there is a route under the bridge, then all the clearances should go on the under record form. In the under record form, the route which is specified as going under the bridge, those clearances belong to that route. So with all the brief time I have, this is my presentation. And just wanna tell you guys what our responsibilities are. In the load rating section, we do the load rating. We also do the posting of the bridges all across the ODOT bridges. We review the consultants' load ratings, the load ratings of new and old bridges. And we also provide the support to permit office and bridge management section. This is the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain those.
Hey, thanks, Amjan. I've got two questions. How do you change the coordinates and asset-wise? Every time I go to a bridge, the coordinates are grayed out. I can't edit them. I think he means there's two coordinates. There's a 16 and a 1601. The 16 and 17 are grayed out. And updating the coordinates is done manually using the teardrop instead of typing in the coordinates. So one you type in, the other you drag and drop. I think, are you going to go through an example, Amjan?
If you Mike, you think I have time, I can give you the live demo for this one.
Yeah, if you give 1 minute or less, pressure's on.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Okay, so this is the bridge. This is just I picked a bridge in Ohio 7, and when we go to the edit asset values, and there are two fields for coordinates. Lat longs. This is the grayed out, which I think the question is related to. Because these fields, these are grayed out. To change these coordinates, the only way to change these coordinates is to go through map. So you click this option, this map pin, and then
Then click on main map. Yep.
yeah, and then the click on the main map. My mouse is not working. Just a second. So you click on the main map, and once you main map over here, then if you want to move this dot, this is the dot, you hold to this dot and you move at the right place. So the best way to do this is go to the aerial photograph, then you actually see where the bridge starts, move the start of the bridge, this is where the abutment is, and then from here you can save the new marker position. So when you save this new marker position and then you go back to your once you have saved it, when you go back you will see that these values will be changed accordingly. So this is how you update these grayed out values.
Good. I've got a question about railroad bridges over county roads. The question is, what about railroad over county roads? So I will guess that means, do we have to inspect? Do counties have to inspect railroad bridges over county roads? And the official answer is that is a bridge in Ohio. It meets the definition because it's under a highway. And the responsible party, if we were in a vacuum by default, is the railroad company. So ensuring the county can follow up with the railroad and ensure that bridge is inspected. They have a right, it crosses over their right of way. We in the state system, instead of working with the railroad on all the bridges, we have decided to inspect those bridges ourselves with a secondary or cursory inspection to make sure nothing's going to fall onto our traffic. We've got a lot of volume of traffic, so it's a safety inspection. And we have a robust permitting department, so we need to permit through those openings. So we have taken it upon ourselves to do the second inspection and to do the measurements. It is not required that the county inspects the railroad bridges. However, it's certainly recommended. It's a practice that we do. It is a bridge crossing over your public right-of-way. No further questions, Amjad, other than those two. If any pop up between now and the time we close the webinar, we'll share them. We'll respond to the individual questions.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Just have a new question.
Okay, good. ODOT used to batch print PDF versions of the BRD6 forms so we could take them into the field. I understand ODOT cannot do that anymore, and AssetWise is our only option to open each bridge and print an individual report for each bridge. The answer is that is an option. If you decide to have a paper copy in the field, you can print off those, and they have to be printed off individually. Sadly, yes. What we will say is that you can now use an iPad version of AssetWise. And the iPad is a very big time saver, especially if you are taking notes and taking photos in the field. You drive, it's basically having the iPad with you, and it automatically sorts and orders the bridges that are closest to you geographically. And as you drive closer to the bridge, you can just set, directions to the bridge, and then you can drive right to the bridge. You can download up to 100 bridges on your working set and work through a township, work through most of the county using your iPad. So that is probably the best option that we have for you now. Batch prints are not available. It's in the enhancement request, but I don't want to promise anything. It is something that we really want, really desire, but we physically do not have the button, do not have the ability to batch print out of AssetWise. So yes. Can we get PDF files of inspections for the field? I guess that was the same question. With the iPad, can you work offline, or does it require internet access at all times? You can do either. You can have you can work offline, or you can be connected to satellite. So there's two options there. Someone that's way better at the iPad than me is Jared Bax. You heard from him earlier about the critical findings. Reach out to Jared if this is something you're really interested in, or you have an iPad, or you're considering buying one, you're budgeting for it. Reach out to Jared through email or phone, and he has done tutorials for state inspectors, and then opening something up for non-state inspectors, county, municipality, might be something that we could do. So reach out to him and let him know your questions, and if you might be interested in something in that nature.
Yeah, if Mike, if I can add on to that real quickly. So I did, regarding the iPad, I did send a directions PDF document to Omar and Mark Stockman as well, which I believe they forwarded to, to the counties and to the munis. So hopefully you've seen that. I am planning on scheduling something similar to this, like a registered, go-to webinar to explain the iPad and the collector app more in depth. So I'm looking to get that scheduled within the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for an invitation through LTAP for an iPad training.
Thanks, Jared. I've got a lot of questions. I think we'll answer them individually through email. The last question I'll answer is the AssetWise query function. We do have that available. I think we have it available to a limited number of counties. If you are desperately in desperate need for that query ability, email me. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Tim, and you can take us home.
Okay. Today was a big investment for the state of Ohio. We had roughly 375-ish people on the call today. That's a big investment. And so what's our return on investment? Well, hopefully you walked away today with something you didn't know starting the day. I'm hoping that you heard a lot about safety. I heard a lot about consistency. And the one takeaway, actually, I'm gonna do a shameless plug first. ODOT, Amjad didn't mention this, but ODOT currently has a position that's opened up in our office. If you want to come work for ODOT, generally in the load rating world, give me a call or fill out the application online. So that's a shameless plug. I don't mind doing a shameless plug. But what I want you to walk away today with is, we hammered on documentation. Right, you heard that over and over and over again, and you're saying, Tim, how does documentation relate to safety? And to me, it's about rate of change. The faster a bridge changes, the more focused we need to be on that asset, right? And so the only way you can understand rate of change is through your documentation. So that's how it fits. Is the more documentation and the more you can understand the rate of change of that bridge, how fast it's changing, the more focused you can be, and the safer we can make this inventory. So with that, I want to thank you. We hit right 11:30. I want to thank you all for joining us. I appreciate the time that you put into this. I appreciate all the presenters. Thank you very much. And so with that, I'm going to let you get on with your day and have a good day. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Tim.
you, everyone.